And I was like, gosh, I can't think of it. And then I'm pretty sure I actually said my effing life. And then I thought, and I was like, oh, fork. And the reason why I say it, because if you can go through law school, pass the bar, and do all that, you really can do like anything.
Picture this, you're a lawyer. You've spent 7 years defending people in a court. The job is fine, you don't hate it, but something's missing. So one day in 2016, you start a food blog. You write your first post about getting the fishy taste out of a catfish. No one reads it, but you love the feeling of creating something. It's fun. Then life happens. You go through IVF treatments, you're exhausted. You press pause on the blog. Fast forward to December 2018. Your blog income matches your lawyer's salary. By January, it exceeds it. You text a friend immediately, I'm quitting my job. Tanya Harris didn't plan to become a full-time food blogger. But in April 2019, she did it anyway. Today, My Fork in Life gets over 1 million visitors a month, and she's making 6 figures annually, and while wearing fuzzy slippers and a 2-pack t-shirt. I'm Stephen Stanberry, and this is the business behind the story. Tanya, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
That was a mouthful a while ago. I hope I got everything correct. You still wearing 2-pack shirts or something else?
And it was funny when you said that, I was like, where is that shirt? I've moved since that article, so it's around, but if I had it, I would still be wearing it, or if I knew where it was.
So let's get into it. What was young Tanya like growing up? I know you're half Jamaican, spent summers in Jamaica, and you actually hated cooking as a kid. So what changed?
So, yeah, when I was a kid, my parents were definitely all about education, education, education. So when I was younger, it wasn't that I wasn't encouraged to cook, but they just cooked and provided the food. And it's just like, as long as you're doing well in school, that's all that mattered. And then when I was in high school, I was running track as well on a very competitive track team. So
Yeah.
me in the kitchen cooking wasn't happening, but my parents were always preparing meals. They cooked every night. A lot of Jamaican food. My parents also raised chickens, and it's a lot of different food that was provided for me, but I never really cared about getting into the kitchen and actually
Yeah.
cooking. And then once I started living on my own, and then I had became a single mom, I had to basically start cooking, and I was cooking basic food. It was nothing spectacular about it, but eventually I got to the point where I was just like, I really wanted to know more about flavors and how to cook more efficiently, but also to make sure that the food tasted good as well.
Right. So you mentioned track before you even jump into everything else. So this was at the high school level or the collegiate level?
I started track in high
High
school, and
school, yeah.
then I got a scholarship to run track in college as well.
So was this the short sprints or the longer distance?
I actually, in high school, I did the 400 and 800 and a little bit of cross country, and I was recruited for that in college. But when I got to college, I just did the 400 and the 200. Those are my 2 races.
So who were you competing against? Any of them big athletes now that we are familiar with?
Absolutely. I remember racing against, this is actually in high school, Sonia
Yeah.
Richardson.
Yeah.
Gosh, she's so fast. She's so fast. But yeah, just like a couple of people that you would hear in the Olympics, I've raced against them, and it's always a privilege to run against someone that is at that level, because they could always just make you go a little bit faster as well.
Yeah. No, this was totally not in my plans. If you were to humor me, if you were to go back in time and you had a career to choose between track and law, which would you go with?
Law, like, track is it's a
Much
lot.
work.
It's a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
work. It's a lot of work. But yeah, law was cool, and I can get into that later. But law was more one of those things that kind of not fell into my lap, but it was just like what should I do? I guess I'll go to law school. Not and same with track too. My
Yeah.
parents were like, you need to do something, and I had a cousin who was running track, and she's like, you should run track. There's lots to do, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. Yeah.
So you went to law school, you became an assistant to the public defender in 2009. That's not an easy path. So what drew you to criminal defense, and what did you think that career was going to look like?
Well, when I was in undergrad, I had majored in psychology, and I was doing a couple of different things with psychology in the criminal court system. So
Hmm.
when I was an undergrad, I did like a death penalty practicum where we worked on actual death penalty cases with a mitigation specialist who was my
Yeah.
professor. So I'd always have little things into it, but I wasn't sure that was the route I was going to take. And then when I was in law school, I had interned at a civil firm, which was fine, but it wasn't like it was my calling. But then when I was in law school, they were looking for tutors. They said, "Hey, we want a criminal law tutor." And I was like, I like criminal law, and I would end up doing these things. So when it came time to look for a job, I was looking at different places, but I just was like, let me try, criminal defense, where I would be able to get into a courtroom, basically kind of do the same things that I did in undergrad when I was helping people, look at these complex legal situations, looking at the facts, and just make sure that their rights were protected. So I was drawn to it. That was actually the only kind of law that I practiced when I was a practicing attorney.
So by 2016, you started the blog and you didn't hate your job, but you wanted something of your own. So what do you think was missing at this point in your life?
I think I had been doing so at that time, was it 2009 or 2016? The math is not mathing in my head right now. At that time, the blog was just more of an outlet, right? So for criminal defense, I would have to go into a courtroom. It was like the same thing over and over. I also knew that in order to exceed in that career, I was going to have to make certain moves. So that also meant taking more serious cases.
Mhm.
At that time, I think I was just doing like lower level felonies,
Yeah.
crimes and things like that. But I knew, if I were to keep exceeding, then I'm going to start doing more serious charges or looking for running for office, trying to become a judge. And to be honest, when I thought about my future and I visualized it, none of that was like, wow, this is what I really want to be in my future. And so that's kind of where I started to think, okay, maybe let me figure out what else there is out there that I could do possibly. I didn't know it would be a food blog, but I just kind of started this on a whim.
You started a food blog in March 2016, if the
Mm.
math is mathing, all right? So, My Forking Life, that name, how did you come about that name?
It was really random. I was just in my room. I remember just sitting in my room and I have had random names before, so that wasn't the
Yeah,
first. I think I tried to start a YouTube channel. My family laughed at me because when I was a single mom, it was like Single Mom Cooks, and I was like, I don't really like that. So I was just sitting down and I was like, gosh, I can't think of it. And then I'm pretty sure I actually said my effing life. And then I thought, and I was like, oh, fork, forking.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. But no one else really liked the name when I officially said that was what I was going with. Everyone thought they thought it was too risky and it wouldn't be able to grow. And I was like, I didn't think about it that deeply. I was like, I like it and just signed up for the domain.
I was just about to ask if you went ahead and got the domain immediately.
I did.
Now, while working as a public defender, walk us through the decision to your plate.
Just as like a hobby, like because when you're working, you're going to court or, it's and not like to say my job wasn't overly stressful, but it was pretty serious, right? So I would go to work there. I'm meeting new people every day. I'm speaking to people every day, changing people's lives every day. And so I kind of wanted to go home and just do something that was relaxing. So for me, when the catfish post is like, and it's I didn't know what I was doing, right? But I had did a little bit of research, heard, putting milk in catfish could get rid of the taste. And I was like, oh, I really want to share this with people because, it worked. But I wasn't taking it seriously. It was just like, this is what I've learned. And I would just put it on my website. I wasn't even thinking about monetizing it at that time. It was just something to do.
Yeah. So you've said your mom was Jamaican, but didn't always cook Jamaican food because she was busy as a nurse, right?
Hmm.
In 2012, you bought How to Cook Everything and you made scrambled eggs that night. What happened when you made those eggs?
They were perfect. And I think that's where I started to learn more into like wanting to explain the processes of cooking and not just being like, oh, here's a recipe. So even in that book, there's a couple of like step by step photos. And then I started discovering other bloggers who would literally be very strategic with the step by step photos, which is what I started to do in my blog post as well, because I just feel like it's a different thing, and I guess it kind of goes the same where you can make eggs anyway. You can just scramble them really quickly and they're edible, but there's something when you actually take the time to understand a little bit about the science and the technique so that you can have like the best eggs ever. Do I always make my eggs that way? No. Sometimes I just do it real quick. But then when I really want to, like, I don't know, impress my family, I'm like, I'm gonna make the scrambled eggs that are like the best ever.
I mean, I would say scrambled eggs are scrambled eggs. So explain, how do you go about making perfect scrambled eggs? What's the process like? And how long would this take?
I wanna and I'm trying to remember how long it took. It took a little bit longer in the book, I think, but I think it's essentially, like, if you want those, like, softer, curdier eggs, that's gonna take longer than if you're just doing them really fast in the skillet, which are gonna be kinda harder and drier, and like I said, it depends on the morning. Some days I want them hard and dry 'cause I'm just trying to leave, but if you want them kind of, like, softer and fluffier, you're gonna have to, like, lower your heat and cook it a little bit slower, and it's gonna be, like, how often you stir it and when you salt it. Honestly, that book didn't go into even that much detail. Afterward, I just started collecting cookbooks and watching courses on random stuff, and I would always learn a little bit more.
All right, so you took a break from the blog. You and your husband were going through IVF treatments. You were exhausted, so you pressed pause. Talk about that season when you were going through the treatment, the difficulties, the stress, the emotional toll that might have taken on you and the relationship as a whole, because we know IVF can be difficult and it can be stressful. Yeah.
And financial, it's expensive.
Yes, yes, yes.
Kinda just dealing with all that, and like I said, my blog wasn't making money, it was like a side hobby, so I was kinda just like, whatever, where I focused on that, and when I say focused on it, it's just your mind is, like, filled with so many things. There's a lot of what ifs, you're going to doctor's appointments, you're doing all those things. I kinda wasn't really thinking about it. Now, the odd thing or the good thing is that before I took the break, there was a time where I was learning a little bit more about SEO, Pinterest, Facebook. So I had been putting those things kind of together, but I wasn't seeing like a big return on investment, but I didn't shut it down. I just kind of just let it go in the background while I focused on, just life, just living and going through this process of trying to, have a baby. It's kind of hard to say because I guess it also depends on how you take stress. I feel so it wasn't like overly traumatic. I think I was just kind of going through the motions. So I still had to go to work and then I would still have to go to the doctor's appointment. We would still have to discuss how we're going to pay for this. But I guess it depends, right? I think some people might take it and it's just like really heavy on them. That part of my life was just more of a not a blur, but it was just definitely the emotions weren't too hard. I just was so focused on I'm trying to have a baby, gotta go to the doctor's appointments, gotta check this box off. So that's kind of where I was at that point, and that's why the blog just wasn't even a thought in my mind because I was just focused on work and basically IVF, and then I also had my older daughter too, so I'm still, still being a mom, and then I have my husband, so still living life and doing the regular stuff. But it was very emotional when I got pregnant. And then even that pregnancy was difficulty. So I was still dealing with a lot at that point, but still just factual in my head, like, I'm pregnant. This is a tough pregnancy and just kind of just keeping it moving. But I wasn't even thinking about the blog at all. It was more so when we went to the doctors, it was my husband was gonna have difficulties with conceiving a child, and that was something we kinda knew beforehand, but we went to the doctors, and they still checked us all out, and that's the route we went, and we've shared this before publicly because we do think it's important that people share those kind of stories. I think there is a lot of shame when it comes to it, especially from the men, right? Like they think like, "Oh, it's not the same." And it's like if you want a child and you're having difficulty, our advice, and that's from me and my husband, he's somewhere around, would be for both parties to go get checked out and
Yeah.
then to listen to the medical professionals and then decide what route you're going to take. But I'm a very big proponent of doing that and not having any shame about it at all because at the end of the day is if you get a live breathing human being and who cares? Like, no one comes to me and says, my 8-year-old, they're not like, "Was she, Ivy?" Like, no one cares. But I do
Yeah.
think it's important for us to share our story so that it doesn't have that shame, as well as people understand that I think before I only heard of celebrities doing IVF.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize like normal, people working 9 to 5s, can still get the help of, yeah, and do it. And that's, I wasn't, I wasn't making any money at the blog. We were working our 9 to 5 jobs when we went through the process of the first time.
You're pregnant, you're craving French fries, and you went ahead and grabbed the air fryer. So when did it all come back, the blogging and wanting to create content for the blog?
So it was after I had my daughter. And there was a time, like, the good thing about my job, they were very good with time off, but there was a part of me that wanted a little bit more freedom, especially I think when she was younger, she was in NICU. So there was a time where, we both had to be out of work. And then
Yeah.
so she got sick at one point and we had to like spend 2 weeks in the hospital with her. And again, my job was very understanding. But I was like, will my job always be this understanding? It always depends on who my boss is. That could change anytime. Like there were all these thoughts. And at the same time, I was getting messages of people that had made recipes that I had created before I even started IVF. And they were like, this is so good. On the other hand, I was randomly listening to podcasts or reading income reports of other bloggers that were making significant revenue off their websites. So I'm hearing all of these things at the same time. And I'm just like, maybe I should give this another go because
Mhm.
not just for the money, but the other part is like people actually appreciated the work that I had done. So why not, just continue it to see where it goes?
Yeah. So when did you become obsessed with the business side of learning to operate a blog and to run a blog and probably monetize the blog?
Around that time. So I think it's just I'm sorry, keep thinking. Around that time, it was like reading other bloggers' income reports. They don't do them anymore, but Pinch of Yum in the food blogging space they were known to be the ones that really transparently share how they grew in income. And why that was obsessive to me is because they showed exactly how they earned. And even if my intention wasn't to earn that amount or do exactly what they were doing, they showed the different ways you could monetize initially, right? On a blog, it could be ads, it could be brand
Yeah.
deals, it could be affiliates. But what I liked about those reports where I could be like, yeah, maybe I don't really want to do brand deals, but that ad money seems kind of interesting. So it was around that time where I really was like, and for me, it wasn't that I could turn it to a full-time job. It was like, maybe
Yeah.
I can make $100 or something like that. It's like, let me see what I could do. And that's when I started getting more into, listening to podcasts, reading whatever I could to learn how to build an online business, especially like in the food space.
So how much you made from the first blog, or was it from ads? Was it from affiliate?
No, I wanna say my first check was like a I won't say a brand deal, and it was like, what was it? Like $120 to go to, they had like a festival and it was like a sweet tea company, and I just, went and showed up and it was $120. It was not at that time, I didn't think it was a lot of work for me to do, and it was just like I didn't mind doing it. But then I also realized, like, let me look into other ways because I also like, how do you really scale that and what does that look like? So that's when I started learning more about building traffic and putting ads on a website and finding a company to manage my ads and all that stuff.
So in summer 2018, you made the declaration, in a year, I want to quit my job and do this full time. So I want you to walk me through that moment and what gave you the confidence to say that out loud.
To be honest with you, I was probably mad. I probably had a bad there were days where I would just have, like, a bad day at work, and I'd be like, "Nah, Imma quit my job." I said it, but it was funny because I wrote it I was in a small little, like, Facebook group with a couple of other food bloggers, and I said it, and they were like, "Okay, Tanya, whatever." They not in a bad way, but they were just like,
Yeah.
"Alright, you say so, whatever." And I remember, like, what I strongly believe is that if you really feel like you wanna do something, write it down. You can write it and tell other people, but the biggest thing is to just put it on paper. And once I did that, and especially since I said it to other people, I felt committed to, okay, I gotta figure out how to really make this work. So it was at that time where I got more intentional about like, I literally had no life. So I would go to work on lunch break when my coworkers would go to their lunch break. I would literally take my computer to a nearby place, and whether it was work on the blog or watch a podcast, watch a webinar, something. And then on weekends, I was just taking pictures of food and writing a blog post. So I had no life around that time, but it started to work. Whatever I was doing, I started to see that my page views were coming, people were coming to my website more, and then I was able to quit before the year was up.
So what was your husband saying during this time when you decided to, push the blog and create content for the blog?
So my husband's, I would say he's weird. He's different. He actually quit his job before me. He does like movies and he creates movies and he does. So he's the person that kind of got me into like this belief that I could do this full time. Cause before I would have been like 9 to 5. So he was definitely supportive of it. Even when I said I was going to quit, he was like, yeah, makes sense. Like, go ahead, quit. Like, he's never going to say you shouldn't do those things. He's basically been my like biggest supporter when it comes to it. So that's also a benefit is just having someone in your corner that also believes in you and the things that you can do with whatever business that you're running.
Right, so December 2018 now, 5 months after that declaration, your blog income matches your lawyer salary. Then January hits and it exceeds it. So you're ready to quit, but no one else is. What were people saying around you? I'm curious to know what your mom was saying because I know Jamaican parents, I shouldn't say they tend to want their children to stick to traditional 9 to 5 path versus this unconventional method that they're not sure about, which is earning income online, example, as a content creator or a blog writer.
So my mom wasn't really, she wasn't, the fact is like, even when I took the kind of legal job, a lot of people in my family were like, "Why?" Because you don't get paid the big bucks to do like criminal defense or that kind of law, right? So I was already kind of getting the side eye, like, "Why did you pick that as a career choice? You could have been a partner at a firm." And I'm just like, because I do what I like to do. So I didn't get that much from them when I was taught. I didn't tell them much about quitting the blog. That was more so to like my coworkers or my friends. I would talk more about that too. And their response was always, no, mainly because the idea of you went to law school, you're a lawyer, it took you this long, you could do both, you're doing both right now. Why would you want to leave to do that full time when you can manage both and you could just be making, you can make a ton of money on a back end and still come to work and, you'll have all these benefits like student loan forgiveness and everything else, but um yeah, I just kinda got to the point, and I think I talked about this a lot in the article where it was hard to quit, but I just made sure that I surrounded myself with people that had done it before, and that's not in real life because I don't know any people like that in real life. It was people on podcasts that I listened to that had quit and built successful businesses. And then if I heard people that did, and I would hear the sob stories, right? Like I quit my job and I lost all my income. I would listen to it. I would take note, and sometimes I would be more strategic as to like how does that situation differ than mine? So like I was looking at my income and was like, even if I quit my job and my income fell in half, I would still be okay. Does that make sense? I would still be making substantially more than I was making at my 9 to 5 before I decided to make my quit. So it wasn't like a just leap and jump. It was paying attention to a lot of different things, but yeah, it wasn't easy to just make that decision. And I couldn't just make the decision based off of money either. There had to be other things that I considered before I decided to leave.
All right. Glad you mentioned money because I'm going to ask you a question about that. You saw the check on one hand from your lawyer's salary, and then on the other hand, you saw where your blog made more money. Describe that feeling to me. Was that when you believed and say, yes, this can work?
I did somewhat. I still was kind of nervous, like, what if it all just disappeared? Like, you always have that, especially if it's on like an online business, which sometimes happens, right? Like, I know people that will make a substantial amount of money and one algorithm update or something can wipe their business away overnight. But I remember this specifically when my blog was earning 3 times more than I was making at my job. I went to the office of one of my coworkers and I was just talking to him like, I don't know what to do. Like I'm making this amount on this website. And he was like, most of the time when people are making that much in business, it doesn't just disappear. He was like, you have to trust that it will be fine if you decided to quit and that you will be able to make even more than that. And I don't know why it just took somebody else just saying that for me to be like, you know what? You're right. I'll be fine. And so it was able to like that and everything else but it felt good, I guess, too. But I was still kind of scared that it would kind of just always fall back or it wouldn't scale. But I was thankful. So that's one thing I would say I was very grateful and thankful that I was able to build this extra source of income. And I guess I was still kind of shocked that it was that much, if that makes sense, because I was like, I don't know how, but thank God.
It's now 2026, 10 years. Social media has changed a lot since then. The internet has changed a lot since then. How do you manage to adapt and evolve and stay relevant throughout that period?
I don't know. You tell me. I'm still learning. One of the things I will say is trying to be a little bit ahead of the games. Thinking I wanna say, like, back in 2016? One of the earlier years, I remember, my ad company a lot of people would say video, like, "Get into video, learn how to do video." And so, I started just learning a little bit more about, camera and food videos, and that helped with a lot of that initial success. So, what I try to do is just look at what is working and where I think the industry is heading, and one thing I can say is inserting yourself into your business, whether it's just a little bit your personality, your style, I think that's what keeps with that longevity. So I won't say I do the best at it, but I like even in my logo, it says my forking life with Tanya Harris. That's a bit of me. I in my bio, it always says that I'm an attorney turned blogger because it's a part of my life. I talk a lot about, even though I live in the US, I live in North Carolina, I talk a lot about my upbringing with, growing up in a Jamaican household. And I do believe inserting that and that's just never going to get old. And I think that's what helps with social media, whether it comes to storytelling or building a loyal fan base. It's just like always doing that.
You've had to deal with a lot of negative comments in general. You said your response to doubters was basically, would you feel any differently if I told you I was leaving to start my own law firm? Talk to us about that logic.
Yeah, I guess I personally believe that people put their own expectations on you and your life, right? So when it came to quitting, people were like, "What to do a food blog?" Because food just feels like they just think I'm just over here, just like it's easy, right? Like I'm just in here easily putting it up. And for them, I think it's hard to believe that you could build an empire sharing recipes for free online. And I think there's just this idea that you're supposed to I could be wrong. I think it's that you're supposed to kind of struggle in order to get success. And not to say opening your law firm is struggle, but it would be hard. I think opening both are hard, but like for them, it just feels more prestigious. If I was like, yeah, I'm going solo and I have this big law firm and I'm getting all these clients, I think they would support that more. But I also realized like that was just a part of my life anyways. Like when I decided to become an assistant public defender rather than going down the corporate routes, I was already getting those side eyes like, why would she do that? So I realized no matter what I did, that was going to happen. So for me, my main goal is like what I can do to make sure that I'm fulfilled. And honestly, it also really matters about how I'm going to be able to support my family. No matter what I'm doing, as long as it's ethical and if I can support my family and pay my bills, then that's generally what I prioritize.
Well, my info says you have about 67,000 plus subscribers, which probably is old info. You probably reached 70,000 now,
For my email
or not
list,
yet. Yeah.
I actually had reached like 90 something thousand and then
Wow.
but I did cut that. So now I'm at like 71,000 again.
So you cleaned up those that haven't been active. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. So let's talk strategy. How did you go about building that email address from starting and retaining those emails and converting them to possibly sales based on products that you might be offering, books, recipes, all of that?
So the main thing is to one, become an expert in something, right? That doesn't mean that my whole website is food, but I won't say when people ask like, what do you blog about? I'm like, I don't know, whatever I'm eating. But I will say that there are particular categories that I've done more content on, that I've dug a little bit deeper on, that I've been able to funnel people into my email list that way. So a big one that helped my email list early on was creating what's called they're like sequences. So let's say you were looking up an air fryer chicken recipe. You'd have a pop-up that would say, get my air fryer guide. And I call it a guide as, because I did so many air fryer stuff. I'm an expert. And once you sign up every day for 5 days, you're getting a brand new email that might talk about a particular subject when it comes to the air fryer. It might be, air fry vegetables, air fry steak, and I'm giving you additional tips. So the idea to do that is one, you're hearing from me repeatedly, but I'm not just giving you like just basic stuff. I'm going a little bit deeper to turn you into a person that is happy to be on the list, happy to continue clicking on it. And when I launch, an ebook or whatever, you're more inclined to buy. And so I've done that for a couple of different categories. I could probably do a better job at it, but I've done it for the air fryer stuff. I've done it for the Jamaican recipes I have on my website as well. And so it's also like anytime someone lands on my page, whether it's from Google or Pinterest, I try to grab some of that audience to get on my list so that I can continuously promote to them as well as for them to remember my brand.
Now, do you do all of this yourself, or do you have a team helping you from the marketing to managing the newsletter? Tell me about that.
I do the newsletter myself because I'm crazy and I probably should hire part of the reason why I haven't let it go is because I sometimes I think you can hire out for stuff and then you kind of lose a part of your personality in the business. So there are certain things that I just like I still have help with like my website management and other things, but when it comes to things like that, I want to be the person that writes the emails because I want to be more strategic on like the language that I'm using, the things that I'm deciding to promote, what I'm deciding to promote it. So I do it myself. I just block out some time just to make sure I get it done.
Yeah. All right. So the number one goal is to drive persons to your newsletter. Where does most of the traffic come from? Google, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook?
Google is my longtime biggest traffic source, and then Pinterest is my Pinterest has actually been silly to me lately. So Pinterest and Facebook are kind of like down there, and then newsletter comes out because if I'm sending out newsletters, I'm sending out links to my website. And majority of the time, if I'm sending out a newsletter, my goal is to get those people to come to my website so they can see the ads and the products that I'm selling on my domain.
You've also made a mental shift from collecting email addresses to what does my reader want? So walk us through that mindset. What changed in how you approach your list building?
Yeah, because what I don't want maybe that's why I cut, like, all those people off my list. I don't want just people and I guess they're different people, right? Like, I
Yeah.
shouldn't say I don't want them on my list, but if I were to have the ideal person on my list, that's a person that I could send whatever I want to them, and they're opening it, and they're clicking it, and they're
Yeah.
engaging in it. And I do think sometimes there's this idea of the more people on your list, the better. But honestly, that's not true because you might have people on your list that are just not interested in your content, which is fine, but you're paying for those people, by the way. So it's like the more people I have, if they're not opening the emails, then they're not my ideal person. So I won't say every 70,000 people on my list love everything I say or send, but there is a percentage of people that do open. It's a smaller percentage, but they open every single email. And it's my job to just make sure that I'm sending out things that will interest them, whether they decide to make the recipe or not. They're interested in learning more about whatever I sent that day.
So you email your list twice a week, right? Still twice a week.
It's gone up to 4, but I'm
For
going back down
okay.
to 2.
You use that strategy initially, twice per week. Is it that you didn't want him to forget, but at the same time you didn't want it super easy for them to be bombarded with emails? Because we know sometimes when persons get emails 4, 5, 6 times a week, they tend to unsubscribe because it's not everybody that reads the emails daily. So walk us through that methodology and why you use that initially.
I think 2 was just also enough that I could handle, where I felt that I was actually providing value because I've gone up before, right? And it depends on the season. Like if it's Q4 and it's more of like the profitable for business, I'm doing 4. But on slower seasons, I'm gonna, slow it down. And like you said, like people might be getting my email every day and then like they might get email fatigue and they may not even unsubscribe, but they're just not opening it. And if they're not
Yeah.
opening it, it's going into another promotions and they're just never seeing it. So I think it's about testing, figuring out what works best for you and then figuring out if it's affecting your bottom line as well. Because some people, the more emails they send, the more clicks they get to their website, the more money they make. And for others, the less emails they send, the more clicks they get and the more money they make because they're getting a bigger open rate and things like that.
So, how does one operate a blog business? Someone listening or watching and they want to start a blog in 2026 and with AI and everything else in front of them, how can they start and be successful?
Ooh, that's hard. But I think like what I said is like inserting yourself in your posts. And so, and I, the reason why I didn't mention like social media at your question earlier is because I don't get a ton of traffic from social media, right? It's there. But I also understand the importance of being there so that people, if you do land on my website, you know, there's a real person behind it. It's not like an AI bot. So that being said, I would say like create a kind of like a strategy and think of a long-term vision, but also know that your long-term vision, you're going to have to like, in my opinion, you're going to have to be in there somewhere. You're going to have to think about a style. I wouldn't say necessarily think of a niche, like think of a niche, but also just think of like how you can stand out in a crowd. Like what about you, whether it's your personality, your background, the way you cook, your beliefs, how that could be different. Because when I started in 2016, it was not as saturated. It's much more saturated, but I don't think that means that you can't, break through the noise.
Looking back, what's one thing you've invested that was a complete waste of money? And what's been the best investment you made?
That's hard because I'm never going to think that something is a complete waste of money. I will say the things that I think that I spent the best money on, and I can't say all of them, but courses. I am a person that believes that you can never spend too much on education. So if there is something that I'm particularly wanting to learn about, whether it's Instagram, YouTube, whatever, I will invest in a course. And I think I usually, or conferences, actually a really good investment that I've put my money into. Things that I can say that may have been a waste of money, some courses, maybe, if they weren't good. And I will say this, it's kind of hard to pinpoint it, but sometimes we invest money into things because other people tell us we should invest money into. So I've hired employees for projects or contractors for things that weren't really things that I cared about, but someone else said, you got to hire someone for this. And it wouldn't matter to the bottom line of my business, nor would it help me make more money. So I usually always say, just think about what you personally could use in your business before you start spending
Yeah.
money. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So let's talk about the hard part. You struggled with imposter syndrome like most of us. I always feel like whenever I do, maybe it's not good enough. The negative comments started coming once your blog got big. So how did you deal with that?
Well, imposter syndrome, I think I still have a little bit of it. And then I started to realize that we're all just regular. So even your biggest celeb is just a regular person. So once I started thinking more like that, that kind of, you know, went out the window. So not out the window, but I don't worry too much. The negative comments, that took a while, but I started thinking like celebs get negative comments and they deal with it in their certain way. The way that I deal with it is I have like set boundaries. So if I get a negative comment and it's not constructive or it's something that I just don't care about, I will delete and block that person and move on with my life. I have this thing where I don't argue because, and I said this, I was talking to my husband the other day and I was like, I don't argue with you. Why would I argue with strangers on the internet? And I strongly believe that. So, and I guess for some reason now I'm getting way more negative comments, especially on social. And again, it depends. If it's constructive criticism, cool. If it's an opinion that I don't agree with, I might just block that person too. I'm just at this point where I just don't listen to those people because a lot of times, especially with food, people will give a negative comment on something they haven't tried. And I'm like, why do I care about that opinion? Now, I will get a negative comment of somebody that did try something. And what I would try to do is fix it, right? I think that's also my responsibility where if you tried something and it didn't work for you and you're telling me this, I'm either going to try to fix it or accept that this just may not be your cup of tea. And that's perfectly fine for me. But when it's blatantly rude, nope. I treat it like I would treat someone that came to you cannot come in my house and disrespect me. You're not gonna come on my pages and disrespect me either. I'm just gonna boot you out. That's how I think about it.
I think in my research, I said you went on Martha Stewart's blog and you would read negative comments. Why?
Well, and I think at that time it was like, is it just me? Am I the only person? And then it realized like, oh, she gets a lot of negative comments and she is just like an amazing, entrepreneur, right? But what I've also noticed about that, it's not just her site, it's any big website, they don't respond to those comments. They're just there. And so I'm like, why am I, as a smaller creator, like trying to respond to these people? So for me, it's just like, I'm not even gonna keep, especially if I can control it, your negative comment is not gonna stay here so people can try to jump and bully me. No, I just delete it and I move on. Now, some people may not agree with that. I don't care. Personally, that's just how I feel, the way that I can stay sane and still provide the value to the people that actually appreciate the work that I'm doing.
You've said one of the biggest rewards is being able to wake up not feeling well and just not want to work in the morning. You took the day off with your husband, went to lunch, talked about basketball, went to the library, didn't check social media. Why was that day so important to you?
Cause it's one of the things, like, and I'm still kind of dealing with this because there are times where I don't do that and I feel guilty about having those days, but I forgot that that's what life can be as long as you're putting those boundaries in place. And so I try to have days where I'm just working, but today's probably one of those days where I'm just gonna be like, "You know what? I had planned to do all these things, but it's sunny outside. I just wanna go and enjoy it." And for me, it's like, that's why I'm building the business that I'm building the way that I'm building it so that I can have those days.
So if you could go back to 2016, Tanya, and the one still being a lawyer and just starting the blog, what's one thing you would say to her to save her time, stress, or money?
That is a really good question, and the number one thing I would say is get organized. I wish I started out with a very more intentional, like, tracking, not even just blog posts, but tracking like photos that I was taking, tracking videos. Even now, when I'm trying to onboard somebody, I'm like, oh, where's this video I posted? Is it on my phone? Is it on my camera? Is it on this computer? So I would say the thing that, and I've gotten way better over the years now, but if I started out strictly organized, really, that would be like my number one thing. It's just to get organized.
Awesome. So, what's the most surprising thing that has happened since you started the blog? Something that you never saw coming?
I mean, maybe like having the opportunity. So my husband also quit his job, and so he works for the company as well. So I think being able to employ someone outside of myself was probably one of the biggest like surprises. Because again, I didn't know how big. I thought maybe it could just support my salary, but being able to like hire my husband and also hire other people as well to pay salaries to help other people be able to support their livelihood is the biggest surprise, but also one of the biggest blessings and things that I appreciate about having my business.
If you had to rebuild my forking life from scratch tomorrow with just $500 and your kitchen, what would be the first thing you'd do?
Shoot, that's a well, buy groceries, that's expensive. That's it. I mean, I would do like how I did before. I think now I have way more expensive equipment, like I've got, the fancy cameras and all that. But I would, because I think the cool thing about this industry is like you don't need all that actually. I could get rid of all those things and still be okay. But if I were to invest in anything, it would be a course, but it would be a course maybe particularly on whatever would help my business right now. So maybe if it was a branding course or if it was a course on how to take better pictures with an iPhone, I would invest in that before anything else and groceries.
So, what's one belief you held about blogging or entrepreneurship 5 years ago that now you think is complete BS?
I want to say it's complete BS, but the whole hustle culture, I think that is a little bit outdated. So I think the idea is people think that you've got to work around the clock to make a lot of money or be a successful entrepreneur. And I always found that I always ended up making more money on the times where I was not hustling, but just being more intentional with the direction of my business or the work that I was doing. I was working a lot less, but making more because I was just being way more strategic. So
The last one and this one should be fun. And I'm really interested to know how you're going to answer this. If you could put one message on a billboard for every lawyer thinking about leaving their job to pursue a passion, what would it say?
like one line? I mean, it sounds very cliche, but like you can do it. And the reason why I say it, because if you can go through law school, pass the bar, and do all that, you really can do like anything. And the reason why I say that is because it takes a lot of dedication. It takes a lot of I actually had this, and this is probably going expanding on that question. I had this realization with I was talking with a friend who also is a food blogger, and we were just thinking of like what, I was having difficulty like trying to figure out what I love about this business. And what I realized is the fact that I'm always learning every single day, whether it's learning a new culinary technique, whether it's learning a new, way to grow on Instagram or whatever, I'm always learning. And then I was like, oh, duh. Like when I was in law school, I was always learning. And I think I'm just a student at heart. And so if I feel like lawyers are usually students at heart. And so if you want to pursue whatever it is, as long as you take that same skill where it's like, I always want to learn, I always want to get better, I'm learning new things, applying it to my business, I think you could do whatever you want to in the world.
Noah said that was a final one, but this one is a final, and it's about it's about revenue. What's the most you've earned from your blog in a year?
Ooh, well, I'll be honest, hadn't hit a mil in a year, but I was very close. So over 900K. And that's not every year. It was a really good year. It was a wonderful year. I hope to get back there and more, but
And if you should break it down, I know I'm putting you on the spot with this, but if you should break it down, what were the areas that these revenues were coming in and the highest ones?
it's mostly ad revenue. It's the mostly, and the thing with ad revenue is it depends on like this whole bunch of stuff, but like CPMs, RPMs, the amount of traffic. So the years that I had more traffic was when I earned more in ad revenue. The second income stream is like affiliates. So the more traffic I get, the more I can make on affiliates, but it's not as much compared to the ad revenue. Then the other one would be like brand deals, but I don't do a ton of those. And that's also kind of intentional. I like ad revenue because I feel like it's I won't say it's 100% passive, but it's a bit more passive than the other revenue streams.
Tanya, this was awesome. It was phenomenal. Thank you so much for being real with us today about the IVF, about the doubt in your business, the leap of faith. I know that it's going to resonate with a lot of people listening right now. So before we wrap, where can people connect with you, find your recipes, and learn more about My Forking Life?
Well, everywhere on the internet it's going to be myforkinglife.com. So the website's My Forking Life. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube. It's on Instagram, Facebook. All it's My Forking Life is the handle.
Awesome. That was Tanya Harris, and 3 quick takeaways before you go. Number 1, fun is a valid reason to start. Tanya's first blog post about catfish. No one read it, but she loved the feeling of creating something that's enough. Number 2, sometimes you need permission to take the leap. For Tanya, it was 1 paragraph in a random book from a Kickstarter. You're every bit as capable, worthy, and ready. 4 months of doubt ended with 1 text: I'm quitting my job. Number 3, your email list is your safety net. Social media depends on algorithms. Google depends on rankings. Build your email list, that's yours. Tanya grew hers from 3,000 to close to 100,000 by focusing on 1 question: what does your reader want? If this episode hit you, do me a favor, share it with 1 person who needs to hear it. Tag me on LinkedIn or Instagram, let me know what landed for you. And if you're building something on the side right now, just know Tanya was once rubbing her pregnant belly in a store aisle buying an air fryer. You're not behind, you're right on time. I'm Steven Stanberry, and this is the business behind the story. See you next time.